watching my Olliers video, but I had it on my phone too,
Oh.
and I just turned it down.
I was like, why can I hear it?
That's it.
Hey everyone. Welcome to the channel here. And this is, by the way, I'm Scott, and I founded a company called Understand Your Accent, and we are dedicated to helping global English speakers both better understand and be more readily understood by native English speakers. I have my undergraduate degree in college actually in speech pathology. So, communication disorders with a concentration in speech language pathology. What that means is I know the phonetic alphabet, I know phonetics, I know how to transcribe people's speech into phonetic letters to be able to analyze their speech. I know how to help people form certain sounds and it goes well beyond that. So that's my background in speech pathology, but I actually didn't become a speech pathologist. I ended up in the financial services industry where I worked with many global English speakers. And about 5 years into that career, I became a corporate trainer. And I actually did a lot of training with global English speakers, especially offshore folks. And I did that for about a decade. And then I got into IT, so information technology. And within my last 12 years in being in information technology, I've literally worked with hundreds of global English speakers from all over. The vast majority of them actually are from India. And as I worked with these brilliant people, I noticed one common denominator, that even though they're able to read and write English very, very well, many of them really struggle to be readily understood by their native English speaking counterparts, especially those in North America, especially Americans and even Canadians. So I created Understand Your Accent to really help combat that and to help people understand what's really happening here. So if you haven't noticed, if you look in my description here, you'll see that I do have a Facebook page. It's a private group, actually. Please go ahead and ask to join. I'd love to have you come in. You're going to see things in there that you've never seen before. I have a 10-day spoken English clarity challenge where I break down. It's very, very detailed in terms of why you're not being understood clearly. You know, you've learned, maybe you've been studying English most of your life. You have a wonderful vocabulary, you have great grammar, you have syntax, you're understood very well in written English, and yet when you try to speak, either you're greeted with blank stares, or perhaps you're asked to either slow down or repeat what you said. And that's because spoken English has a whole different set of rules than English that you were taught in English lessons in school. And especially when speaking with Americans, because we all have our own accent, right? And with Americans, we decode our people's English based on certain rhythmic and pitch structures. And so if those structures aren't in line, it takes us longer to process what is being said. And sometimes we're unable to process it at all. And that's called cognitive overload. And it looks like. So that's cognitive overload, and we want to avoid that. So how do we avoid that? We avoid cognitive overload by teaching you the rhythmic patterns that Americans expect, and quite honestly, not just expect, they actually need to be able to decode what's being said. Now here's a question for you, true or false? And you can put this in the chat. True or false? Actually, before we do that, can you guys, hi Isabella, can you guys hear me? Okay. Can you hear me? If you can you let me know in the chat? I had a problem yesterday with my live not being audible. All right, so let's go ahead and move forward here. True or false? slowing down helps your spoken English clarity. What do you think the answer is? Is that true or false? It's actually false. Slowing down or having to slow down your speech is actually a symptom, not a solution. So it's a symptom of your listener not being able to match up your rhythm and pitch patterns with what they're used to. So it's not necessarily speed that's the issue, it's other things, and I'll prove it to you. I'll give you an example. If you've ever watched American television or even seen the ads online for different prescriptions, different drugs, you'll notice that they have very rapid disclaimers that are spoken at the end. They're delivered extremely quickly, and yet they're still understandable if you listen to them. So that actually proves that speed isn't the issue. But the reason why the speed isn't an issue for Americans listening to that is because even though it's fast, the pitch and rhythm patterns are what we expect. And so we're not using extra processing time to try to figure that out, so we can process this very, very quickly. So that's proof that it's not speed, it's actually alignment of things that you weren't necessarily taught. Because here's the thing, when you're taught English, and really any language, everybody learns pretty much the same way when we learn a different language. We start out with the sounds that we're already familiar with from our own language. And then we start learning sounds for the new language that are kind of tainted by the ones that we already know. And then we start learning vocabulary, right? So we're learning vocabulary, we're learning the words, what they mean. We're learning grammar. How do we put the words into sentences that are grammatically correct and make sense? What is the syntax? Are we making sure that everything is in the right order for this to all work? So we're doing all of these things, and they're critical in learning a language. However, this is where most language teaching ends. You might be able to be a very good writer and being able to read in English pretty well, but perhaps you're not easily understood. And to be honest with you, whether or not you're easily understood probably has more to do with your native language than anything else. There are many native languages in Europe that are close enough to English that people that learn English don't have to change their accent all that, or don't have to change their speech patterns all that much, because the differences between the rhythm and the pitch patterns are small enough, I guess, or at least understandable enough that you don't have to spend a lot of time processing. But there are other languages in which they are different enough, and it can cause more issues for people trying to understand the rhythm and the pitch issues. So what I'm describing is something that I call, we learn from the inside out method. We learn our sounds, we learn our vocabulary, we learn our grammar and our syntax, but then there's an outer ring.
Still there.
Your rhythm, your pitch, your intonation, those things are on the outside, the outer ring. And the challenge with that is we're not necessarily taught how to use the pitch and the rhythm where people from other native languages are able to easily understand. But people actually decode English from the outside in. So while we are speaking word by word, people are decoding, and they're not doing this on purpose, it's just something the brain does. They're decoding your speech from the outside in, your rhythm patterns, your pitch patterns, and then from those, they can recognize what the words are, what the syntax is, but they start from the outside in. And so here at Understand Your Accent, we actually use what's called the outside in method. So we start with a very simple process. We assess,
Bagel biter?
we refine,
You
and
are
then
bagel
we
biter?
expand. And so we assess by having you take an assessment, and that assessment actually is comprised of a couple of speech samples that we get from you. And these speech samples are sent to native English speakers who will then listen to these samples and they will transcribe what they hear. And once they transcribe it, it goes to a different person that has what they know what the person originally said, because when you're assessed, you're using a script, or you provide the script that what you said. The person who is transcribing it does not see that, but the person rating it will look at the difference between what the person transcribed and what you said, and that difference creates what we call your intelligibility score. So intelligibility within within applied linguistics means how much of your message was received by the listener. And so we actually assess that through this technique where we have people transcribing what they hear. So that's intelligibility, but there's another piece of applied linguistics that's super important, and that's called intelligibility. So comprehensibility. So comprehensibility is how hard someone has to work in order to understand or to get the intelligible message. The harder they work, the less comprehensible it is. So what happens with this assessment is as these people are transcribing what they hear, they're also rating you on what's called a Likert scale, on a scale of 1 to 5, how difficult it was or actually how easy it was to process. So the higher the Likert score, the higher the comprehensibility. And then what we do is we will take this assessment based on the intelligibility and the comprehensibility, and we will actually place that on the understandability grid and show you where you are within this understandability matrix. That's where we start. So that is actually a baseline for us to start. And then what we do is we'll work and we will not only get your comprehensibility and your intelligibility, we will look at different high leverage opportunities, also known as what we call HLO, high leverage opportunities, where if we go ahead and address some of these things, your intelligibility and comprehensibility will shoot up. Typically, that is found within shifting your rhythm and your pitch patterns. So once we have that, now we can go from assess to refine. And what we do now is you can work with native English speakers, specifically with me, and we will get your rhythm profile by having you say different things. And I actually run that through a program, and you can see the rhythm of your speech in that particular speech sample based on what we call syllable onsets. And we look at the difference between your rhythm pattern of that speech sample and my rhythm pattern. I'll say the same thing. And we can start looking at the difference between onset times of each syllable as well as the pitch patterns. So this is a very, very measured, it's research backed. We're not just guessing here. We're starting with, okay, we know you want to be more readily understood. That's great. but we need to understand where you are. So, being in IT for all these years and being a business analyst, I'm really big in understanding what is the current state. So that current state is actually found by the assessments that I talked about. So we get the current state. We know future state is you want to be more readily understood. And in this case, what we're going to say is we believe that to be more readily understood by Americans, you're going to have a rhythm and a pitch profile that is more aligned with what Americans are expecting to hear. So that's our future state. And then what we do now is work with you to go from current state to future state. And we do that a few different ways, but the most important way that we do is we actually use multi-sensory options for you to really understand and really to internalize and recognize the fact that your rhythm differences, your rhythm patterns are different. And I think at some point, all of us kind of recognize that there are differences between our speech, but we don't really necessarily recognize to what degree or really look specifically at this. So within Understand Your Accent, one of the things that we do, besides the fact that you listen to my voice and me saying a specific sentence or phrase and listening to yours, then I run that through. I use voice software to actually show visually the difference between my rhythm profile and the syllable onset times as well as yours. But that's not all. So we have sound, right? And we have vision, but we also then work with kinesthetic. And so we're going to use clapping to help us understand the difference between someone that says, I need to practice my English every day, to I need to practice my English every day. And as we use these different techniques, the most important first step, recognition, starts to come in. And then once we recognize that, then we can change. And so that's really the next step here, is going from not even really knowing what makes us sound different to, oh, now I understand it here, but as we share the visual, as we listen to it, as we practice our clapping, now all of a sudden, this understanding goes from our minds into our bodies. And that's where the magic happens, and that's where real change happens. So there's some really exciting things here that we can do. It seems as if we can talk about a few more things, but for now, I'll just wait and we'll see who else joins us.
I'm done.
Hello and welcome. Can you hear me? Hello and welcome. Can you hear me? Been on for a little while. And if you can hear me or if you have any questions, please put in the chat. I'd love to talk with you and find out what questions you have about spoken English clarity. I'm Scott. I'm the creator of Understand Your Accent, and it's a communication coaching program that helps global English speakers both better understand and be more readily understood by native English speakers, specifically Americans. And we do this through a very, very measured, research-backed, analytics and metrics-backed approach. Did you guys order bagels?
Riley DoorDashed a couple of babies.
2 or 3?
I'll let her answer that.
So the thing is, I got 3. But I was thinking about maybe keeping one of them for my meal before work. But
That makes sense. Now I understand your the conversation you guys had about I did it, or I didn't know what, I didn't realize it was food. I thought it was like something else, and she was talking about I would have helped you with the. Got it.
do you want it?
No.
Sure.
Yeah, fine. Hello, welcome. Can you hear me? All right, we'll stay on for a couple more minutes and then we'll wrap this up. Hi everyone, welcome. I am actually wrapping up. Please look at my description, join my private Facebook group, and join us. We do a lot of cool things there that will help you be more readily understood by native English speakers, especially Americans. So welcome. I can't wait to see you over there.